So if you have a sprinkler system and you live in the Midwest or somewhere where you know the temperature drops below zero every year, you know for the most part you're gonna have to winterize it every year. Now an easy solution that'll save you a couple $100 every year is to simply do it yourself. And the reality is it's not that hard. It can easily be done using a standard air compressor. Now for this, I'm gonna be using a 6-gallon pancake air compressor. Now a smaller air compressor like this is gonna take a little bit longer simply because the tank has to refill pretty much for every single zone. Now if you get a larger compressor, you might be able to do 2 or 3 zones at a time, but in most cases, you're still gonna have to wait for the tank to refill at some point, depending on how many zones you got. But like I said, it's something that's pretty easy to do, and you can save yourself $200 to $300 every year by simply doing it yourself. So let's get started. So first we need to shut off the water to the sprinkler system. Now in my case, the shut off is in my basement, but in many cases it'll be located outside the house, maybe in a control box or next to the backflow preventer on the side of the house. Next, we want to remove any excess water pressure on the system. Now if you have a drain valve like I do, you can simply open that up. But if you don't, you may need to remove the cap on the main water line. Next, we're going to set our system to run, and we're going to hit manual start and set it on zone 1 and set it for 2 to 3 minutes. Now, this may vary a little bit based on the type of system you have. Next, we can turn on our compressor and let the tank fill up. Now, you can definitely start this before, as it may take longer than 2 minutes to actually fill the tank. But once the tank is full, we can set the outlet pressure to between 50 and 80 psi. But you shouldn't go any higher than 80 psi or you risk burning out the sprinkler heads. Now 80 psi can be used if you have solid PVC water lines, but if you have a flexible line, you really shouldn't go any higher than about 50 psi. Now we can go ahead and remove the cap to the main water supply line and connect up our air compressor. Now you can buy an adapter online, and I'll link to one in the description, but in my case that didn't actually work, so I had to just go to my local hardware store and find an adapter that would work with the compressor that I have. Now once the air compressor is connected, you should see the sprinkler heads in zone 1 actually pop up and start spraying water. After about a minute or so, you should start seeing a mist, and then eventually you'll see that the only thing coming out of the sprinkler head is air. At that point, usually they start to go back down a little bit. At this point, I recommend switching to the next zone or just shutting the system off completely. If you leave the air running for too long after the water is flushed out of the zone, it could potentially damage the sprinkler heads, so make sure you shut those off. This is another reason why I usually set each zone to run for only 2 to 3 minutes. That way it switches zones automatically. Now once you finish each zone, you'll more than likely need to let the air compressor tank fill back up. And to do that, I recommend disconnecting the air compressor from the main water line or just disconnecting the hose from the air compressor. Once it's full, you can reconnect it and move on to the next zone.